books that priests confiscated and burned, books that monarchs sealed inside royal archives, books that scholars copied in secret and signed with false names. Some of those copies still locked inside Vatican restricted holdings today. We call them grimoires. And the 72 spirits inside the most infamous of them are not chaos. They are a ranked system, a bureaucracy with a floor, a ceiling, and rules. Tonight, you are climbing that hierarchy from the bottom, through the names, the sigils, the pacts, all the way to the most dangerous class in the entire system. This is the Goetia anthology, and the premise is straightforward. One hierarchy, 72 spirits. Centuries of warnings from people who, by every account, believed every word they wrote. What follows is esoteric tradition and religious folklore. Read closely. I am not making metaphysical claims, but the same warnings surface, century after century, in manuscripts that never shared a shelf, authored by men who never corresponded, and some of those patterns persist for reasons scholars have not entirely resolved. That is not a supernatural claim. That is a historical observation, and it deserves to be treated as one. Why does any of this still matter? Because the primary sources are not safely locked in the past. The Mathers-Crowley 1904 edition of the Lemegeton remains in restricted rare book collections at institutions that do not publicize that fact. Researchers still request special access. Librarians still say no. We are going to rank all 72 spirits tonight, from the lowest tier of authority to the most dangerous class in the entire system. We are going to read the actual language of the texts, follow the internal logic of the hierarchy, and take the warnings seriously, not because the supernatural is real, but because the people who wrote these books thought the cost of ignoring them was catastrophic. If the darker corners of esoteric history fascinate you, subscribe. Every week we read what was never meant to be read. Now, let us start at the floor. Pull up a map of Europe and find Cleves, a small duchy on the Lower Rhine, in what is now northwestern Germany. In 1577, a physician named Johann Weyer, court doctor to Duke William of Cleves, published a Latin treatise called De Prestigiis Daemonum. Tucked inside it, almost as an appendix, was a catalogue he titled Pseudo-Monarchia Daemonum, the false monarchy of demons. Weyer listed 69 spirits, their ranks, their offices, their hours of availability. It is the earliest printed source for what would later become the Ars Goetia, and it is the document that gives us our first foothold in the hierarchy. Start at the bottom, and you find a spirit named Buer. The tradition tells us Buer holds the rank of president, and that rank matters enormously here because the Goetia is not a flat list. It is a feudal bureaucracy. Kings outrank dukes, dukes outrank marquises, marquises outrank counts, and presidents, in this system, sit near the floor of formal authority. Buer governs 50 legions of spirits, supposedly, but the office of president carries the least institutional weight of any noble rank in the hierarchy. The legend continues that Buer appears in the sign of Sagittarius, manifesting in a wheel-like form, 5 legs radiating outward so that he can roll in any direction. Supposedly he teaches moral and natural philosophy, the logic of herbs, and the healing of all diseases. That last point is worth holding on to. But here is the line that has unsettled careful readers for 400 years. Weyer writes, in the original Latin, that Buer, quote, teacheth moral and natural philosophy, and the logic of herbs, and the virtues of all herbs and plants, and healeth all distempers in man. Read that again. He heals. He teaches philosophy. He instructs in botany. Notice what it does not say. It does not say he demands. It does not say he destroys. It does not say he corrupts. For a spirit positioned at the lowest rank of a system built around danger and hierarchy, the text assigns him a profile that reads less like a demon and more like a Renaissance physician. Not the symbol, the thing. Weyer, who was himself a physician, gave the most medically useful portfolio in the entire catalogue to the entity with the least formal power. That is not an accident. That is authorial intent embedded in structure. The name Buer resists clean etymology. Unlike many Goetic spirits whose names trace directly to Hebrew or Akkadian roots, Buer's origin is murky. Some scholars have proposed a connection to a Germanic root for dweller or inhabitant, a being defined by its location rather than its function. Others suggest the name is simply constructed, a placeholder for a role. The uncertainty itself is unusual. Most of the hierarchy announces itself through language. Buer does not. Now, Weyer was not a believer in the conventional sense. There is no serious historical record suggesting he personally conducted any of the rituals he described. He was a physician and a skeptic, and his primary argument in De Prastigis Daemonum was that women accused of witchcraft were mentally ill, not supernaturally corrupted, a genuinely radical medical position for 1577. He catalogued these spirits, not to summon them, but to demystify them, to reduce their cultural power by exposing their supposed mechanics. But what fascinates me about Weah's catalogue is the internal consistency of its logic. He built a ranked system with coherent rules, assigned specific offices to specific ranks, and placed healing at the bottom. The implication, whether intentional or not, is that the higher you climb, the further you move from anything that resembles help. That is the architecture of the Goetia's danger, not random, not chaotic, graduated. From the floor of the hierarchy, there is only one direction to travel. Now, let me take you to a manuscript that has been quietly sitting in the British Library for centuries. The Lesser Key of Solomon, sometimes called the Lemegeton, is a mid-17th century compilation, assembled from earlier sources that scholars like Joseph Peterson have traced back through Renaissance grimoire traditions. The Ars Goetia forms its first and most famous part. Peterson's critical edition, published in 2001, remains the most rigorously annotated version available in English, and it is the text serious researchers return to when they want to understand what the original language actually said. Within that text, ranked as a marquis and commanding 26 legions of spirits, sits the entity designated as the third of the 72. His name is Vasago. The legend surrounding Vasago is quieter than most. The tradition tells us he appears in a gentle form, riding neither beast nor storm, and the text describes him, unusually, as possessing a good nature. Supposedly he reveals hidden things, locates lost objects, and declares the truth of things past, present, and to come. The ritual literature suggests he was invoked not for destruction but for knowledge. That sounds almost benign, and that is precisely where the trap is set. But here is the line in the Ars Goetia that magicians have returned to for 400 years, turning it over like a stone they are not sure they want to look under. The text reads, "He declareth things past, present, and to come." Read that again. Not he will tell you what you want to know, not he will answer your question, he declareth. That word is absolute and unconditional, past, present, and to come. There is no qualifier, no limitation, no mention of what the practitioner does with that information once they have it. The text does not say the knowledge is safe to receive. It says only that Vasago possesses it and will speak it. What you do with a declaration of everything that is coming, that is left entirely to you. Vasago. The etymology here is genuinely contested, which is itself revealing. Several scholars have proposed the name derives from a corrupted Latin root, vas, meaning vessel or container, a vessel for knowledge, a vessel for something else. The name may be a container, the question is what it holds. There is no verifiable historical record of any practitioner successfully using Vasago to predict a future event. The documented history of the Lesser Key is a history of manuscripts, copying errors, and competing translations, not a history of verified prophecy. But what fascinates me about the good nature designation is its function within the system. It is not a safety guarantee, it is a classification. And classifications in this hierarchy are about rank and capacity, not about intent toward the practitioner. Good nature, in this context, may simply mean he will not lie to you. It says nothing about what the truth will cost you. Knowledge, without the wisdom to bear it, is not a gift, it is a sentence. Step back much further now, further than the 17th century, further than the Renaissance, further than the medieval period entirely. To find the oldest named entity in the Ars Goetia, you have to travel to the ancient Near East and to a tradition that predates the Lemegeton by nearly 2 millennia. The Ars Goetia, compiled as part of the Lemegeton in the 17th century, lists its entities with varying degrees of historical depth. Most are creatures of the Renaissance imagination. One is not. The entity ranked as a prince, commanding 72 legions, the largest command structure in the entire hierarchy, carries a name that appears in the Jewish deuterocanonical text, known as the Book of Tobit, dated by scholars to approximately 200 BCE. That name is Asmodeus. The legend is ancient and specific. The tradition tells us that in the Book of Tobit, Asmodeus kills 7 successive husbands of a woman named Sarah on their wedding nights before they can consummate the marriage. The story goes that the archangel Raphael instructs the 8th husband, Tobias, to burn the heart and liver of a fish to drive Asmodeus away. Supposedly the smoke of the burning organs was sufficient to repel him. The legend continues into later Talmudic literature, where Asmodeus is described as the king of demons, a rank even higher than the one assigned to him in the Goetia. Across 2,000 years of tradition, this entity has accumulated more attributed narrative than almost any other figure in the demonological canon. But here is the line in the Ars Goetia that stops serious readers cold. The text reads, "He giveth the ring of virtues." Sit with that for a moment. He giveth the ring of virtues. Not a ring, the ring. Definite article, capital V. This is not a metaphor for moral improvement. The tradition surrounding this phrase describes a physical or ritual object that confers specific powers. Read that again. He gives the ring. He is the source. The entity ranked as prince, commanding 72 legions, is presented here not as a destroyer but as a benefactor. And that inversion, the ancient demon of wrath offering virtue, is the most unsettling thing in his entire entry, not the threat, the offer. Asmodeus. The name travels from the Avestan language of ancient Persia, Ayeshma Daiva, meaning the demon of wrath, the Daiva of fury. Daiva in the Avestan tradition means a being of chaos, a destructive spirit opposed to the divine order. The name is itself a description, not a title, a nature. The presence of Asmodeus in the Book of Tobit, a text accepted as canonical by Catholic and Orthodox Christians, is not a supernatural claim. It is a historical and literary fact. What scholars like John J. Collins at Yale have pointed out is that the figure in Tobit is drawn from Persian demonological traditions, absorbed into Jewish literature during the Babylonian exile. The Asmodeus of the Goetia is a 17th century compiler's attempt to systematize a figure that had already been traveling across cultures for 2,000 years. But what fascinates me about that 2,000-year continuity is this. The wrath never changes. Every tradition, every century, every manuscript, the core attribution remains fury. One tier remains above the princes, and the entities who occupy it do not offer rings. Drop a pin on the British Library in London. Walk through the entrance on Euston Road, past the King's Library Tower with its 6 floors of glass and leather-bound volumes, and somewhere in that institution's holdings, you will find the material that fed into the most consequential edition of the Ars Goetia ever published. In 1904, Samuel Liddell, MacGregor Mathers, and Aleister Crowley produced their edition of the Goetia, the edition that, more than any other, shaped how the 20th century understood this text. Crowley's own annotated copy, his correspondence about the work, and the institutional record of its publication form part of what scholars like Marco Pasi at the University of Amsterdam have drawn on to reconstruct the text's modern transmission history. Within that 1904 edition, at the apex of the hierarchy, listed as a king and commanding 80 legions, sits the entity the text describes as the first angel created after Lucifer himself. That entity is Belial. The legend is stated with striking directness in the Goetia. The tradition tells us Belial was created immediately after Lucifer's fall, the second being in existence, the first to follow. Supposedly he appears in the form of a beautiful angel seated in a chariot of fire, and the text notes he speaks with a comely voice. The legend continues that he was created next after Lucifer, and that he fell almost immediately. The ritual literature surrounding Belial is among the most restrictive in the entire canon. The tradition tells us he demands more from the practitioner than any other entity in the hierarchy, and that without adequate offerings he will not cooperate, he will deceive. But here is the line in the Ars Goetia that has made scholars and practitioners stop and reread the passage for centuries. The text reads, "He must have offerings and gifts, or he will deceive." Notice what that sentence does not say. It does not say he might deceive. It does not say deception is a risk. It says he will deceive. Certainty. And then read the first clause again. He must have offerings and gifts. Must. Not should. Not it is recommended. The text is not suggesting a protocol. It is describing a structural requirement for the interaction to function at all. Remove the offerings, and deception is not a possibility. It is the outcome, every time. Belial, from the Hebrew Beli-Ya'al, without worth. Worthlessness as a name that is itself a verdict delivered before the interaction begins. There is no historical evidence that Belial was literally the second angel created after Lucifer. That is a theological claim embedded in a 17th century grimoire, and it has no independent corroboration in scripture or in early church scholarship. The chronology of angelic creation is not addressed with that specificity in any canonical text. But what fascinates me about the first, after Lucifer designation, is its strategic function within the hierarchy. It is not a historical fact, it is a warning about proximity. The entity at the top of this ranked system is not the most powerful because of what he can do for you. He is at the top because of what the text believes he fundamentally is. Without worth, without the capacity to be trusted, without cost. The names, the sigils, the pacts, they have always led here. I need to pause here. The word count requirements you've given me are contradictory and cannot be fulfilled as stated. The writing directions for section 7 ask for 150 to 280 words with multiple beats, paragraphs, and a tricolon return. The word count then says 7 to 10 words strict. These two requirements cannot both be true at the same time.